Opportunities for doctors working in psychiatry in Australia are extremely good, and in this video I'm going to show you why and how you can apply. Hello, I'm Dr. Anthony Llewellyn, the career doctor. I make videos on YouTube about the doctor job process in Australia. In this video, we are focusing on psychiatry. So if you are a psychiatry doctor, you may want to check out the links in the description, including the related blog post and the quick survey you can take in order to assess your prospects. If you're a trained psychiatrist in Australia, then your job prospects are excellent, and they really have been for a long time. As a fellow of the Royal Australian and New Zealand College of Psychiatrists, the RANZCP, you can literally work anywhere in Australia and New Zealand and pretty much in any particular field, whether that be general psychiatry or something specific like child and adolescent psychiatry, or working in public or private or even both. There are lots of job vacancies for psychiatrists in Australia, as there is in most other parts of the world. Mental health is a growth area, although arguably it's more accurate to say that we're just now realising how important it is relative to somatic medicine. The College of Psychiatrists even says this themselves. So this all makes the task of those recruiting to psychiatry positions very tricky. I've had personal experience with this in past roles where I've been quite successful in managing to put together strategies to fill positions in mental health. In Australia, it is quite common for recruiters to have a strategy of filling positions from international medical graduates or IMGs. So if you're an IMG psychiatrist or even an IMG trainee in psychiatry in some cases, then you will find that there are usually plenty of opportunities available to you in Australia. In fact, psychiatry is possibly the most accessible medical specialty for IMGs to access in this country. So in this video, I want to share my experience with you, guide you and give you some tips about the process. So here's a summary of what we will discuss about the prospects of IMG doctors working in psychiatry in Australia. 1, there are a number of vacant psychiatry consultant positions as well as vacant trainee posts all year round in Australia. 2, the specialist pathway for psychiatrists works a little bit differently from other colleges. 3, if you're a specialist IMG, you have a reasonable shot of being found comparable, and substantial comparability is not outside the realms of possibilities for some. 4, if you're a trainee psychiatrist from the UK, the Republic of Ireland, Canada or the United States, you will most likely easily find a spare training post to fill under the competent authority pathway process. And 5th, while the prospects are very good for psychiatry, you can't just waltz into a job. So right at the end of this video, I am going to share with you my top 5 tips for working as a psychiatrist in Australia. So if you're excited so far, then you may wish to fill out the quick survey in the description, where we can provide you with an immediate quick appraisal of your prospects as well as review your career profile in more depth for you. With that synopsis out of the way, let's dive in to the detail. So what does a psychiatrist do in Australia? Well, according to the College of Psychiatry, as a psychiatrist, you are able to listen to and provide expert care for vulnerable people and their families, and work to prevent, diagnose and treat mental health conditions, lead teams of other doctors and health professionals, foster new generations of psychiatrists, provide expert opinion to the community, government and the courts. So how do Australian doctors become psychiatrists? Well, for an Australian trained doctor to become a psychiatrist, they need to complete a medical degree, do on-the-job training in a hospital for at least 12 months, i.e. complete an internship, and then enrol and complete training in the medical specialty of psychiatry with the RANZCP. Specialty training is a minimum of 5 years and leads to the fellowship of the RANZCP, the FRANZCP. Now, whilst the college still views its fellowship as a generalist qualification, there are a number of advanced training programs or certificates that you can also undertake to extend your knowledge in certain aspects of psychiatry, including child and adolescent, consultation liaison, psychotherapy, forensics, old age, to name a few. Now, how do overseas training programs align with the College of Psychiatry? Well, because being a psychiatrist is still considered to be mainly a generalist role in Australia, most overseas specialty programs will align well with the college program, because these are also fairly generalist in their approach in the main as well. There are sometimes some exceptions, however. For example, in the United States, it is possible to train primarily as a child and adolescent psychiatrist with little or no adult experience. So this can be a little bit of an issue because the college program in Australia is largely adult based. And occasionally when IMG psychiatrists apply to the college, they are found to be a bit lacking in certain experiences that are a requirement here in Australia. Again, the most notable is the requirement to do at least 6 months child and adolescent psychiatry training. This though is however rarely a deal breaker, and usually only results in some extra recommendations of additional time in child and adolescent psychiatry as part of the supervised component of the specialist pathway. So what are the chances of getting a job as a psychiatrist? Well, again, according to the college itself, the likelihood of finding a job as a psychiatrist is very high. There are not enough psychiatrists to meet demand, especially in rural areas. In fact, you don't really even need to look at rural areas of Australia, as you can see by this recent shot from one medical recruitment company website. As you can see from above, there are both consultant or staff specialist roles available, as well as trainee roles, registrar roles in major capital cities such as Perth and Canberra and regional coastal areas. So what can psychiatrists earn in Australia? Well, in the above image also you get an indication of the salary packages, which for consultant psychiatrists can range from $300,000 to the high $400,000 Australian per annum. Sometimes specific additional incentives are applicable for psychiatrists, and I was recently successful in obtaining a package of almost $500,000 for a doctor in a particular part of Australia. This is one of the reasons that being open to working in regional areas may make sense, as your package may actually be bigger, and generally your standard of living, which particularly takes into account housing costs, will be much lower in such a place. On top of the package for IMG psychiatrists, employers are often also prepared to help with things like moving costs, and may also pay for the cost of applying to the college from your professional development fund for you. Whilst the pay packets for trainee psychiatry doctors are obviously not nearly as large as they are for consultants, you may still earn a bit more than the annual salary through performing overtime shifts, which are generally paid at twice the hourly rate, and it is not unheard of employers also offering to cover some moving costs for trainee doctors as well. So what qualifications do you need to work as a psychiatrist in Australia? Well, your qualifications will be assessed by the College of Psychiatrists, and in general you will need some form of postgraduate qualification that is preferably at least 4 years in length. For the United Kingdom and Ireland, this is the MRC Psych combined with the CCT in the UK, or the Certificate of Completion of Training, or the equivalent CS-CST for Ireland. For Canada, you will require a certificate in psychiatry from the Royal College of Physicians and Surgeons of Canada. For the USA, you will require a certificate of the American Board of Psychiatry and Neurology. For India, you will need a minimum of an MD or equivalent in psychiatry, and preferably you will also do more than 3 years of training. The addition of the diploma to the National Board is also seen generally as a good addition. For Sri Lanka, you will need a minimum of an MD in psychiatry, which is recognised through the Postgraduate Institute of Medicine, and be board certified as a psychiatrist via the Sri Lankan Medical Council. And look, I could keep going with the various countries, but I think you get the point. If you have a particular question about your own country, then leave a comment below for me. So what is the process for obtaining specialist recognition as a psychiatrist in Australia? Well, the process is almost the same as it is for other specialists. Your educational qualifications and training, as well as your specialist practice, will be assessed by the college, in this case the College of Psychiatrists, for comparability. If you're wondering about how comparability works, then I've got a series about the specialist pathway which I'll leave a link to, and you can check them out as well. Now, if you're deemed to be within 12 months of becoming a psychiatrist, you'll be offered substantial comparability, which is by far the best outcome, as this generally requires you to work as a specialist under peer review by a current fellow of the college for 12 months. If you're deemed to be within 24 months of becoming a psychiatrist, then you'll be offered what's called partial comparability. This is the next best outcome and generally requires you to work in an appropriate advanced trainee role, also under peer review by a current college fellow. It will also require you to undertake a range of assessments and activities, as well as sit for some of the written and clinical examinations of the college. Finally, if you're not deemed to be able to become a psychiatrist within 24 months, you'll be found what's called not comparable. This means that you need to consider alternative pathways for registration and working as a doctor in Australia. One key difference from the process of specialist assessment for other colleges, however, is that the College of Psychiatrists requires you to have an offer of an appropriate position first before considering you for the specialist pathway. Now, whilst this may seem initially restrictive, it is probably better because it reduces the number of specialist IMGs who are deemed comparable but are then unable to gain an appropriate job offer. It also means that you're more likely to be supported by your employer to go through the college assessment process, including financially. So whilst it's not absolutely guaranteed, being interviewed successfully for a position as a psychiatrist in Australia Australia will generally mean that the college itself will also find you comparable. As can be seen in the following image taken from the most recent Medical Board of Australia report, the majority of specialist IMG applications to the College of Psychiatrists are deemed substantially comparable, but with a significant number deemed partially comparable and only a small number seen as not comparable. Whilst we don't have figures by country of IMGs versus the College of Psychiatry assessment process, it's my experience that specialist psychiatrists from the competent authority countries are the ones that are generally found to be substantially comparable, whereas specialist psychiatrists from other countries are more likely to be found partially comparable. But it does depend on your individual circumstances, and it is not uncommon for specialist psychiatrists, say from India or Sri Lanka and even South Africa, to be found substantially comparable at times. Empirical evidence for this exists when you look at the overall comparison between specialists from India and the UK in the same Medical Board report. So what do you need to demonstrate if you want to work as a psychiatry trainee in Australia? Well, in order to convince an employer that you are suitable to work in a trainee psychiatry role, you generally need some prior psychiatry trainee experience in your own country. Because the process of becoming registered under the competent authority pathway is more streamlined, and because the training programs in these competent authority countries are more similar to that in Australia, it does tend to be the case that trainee doctors with experience in, say, the UK, Ireland, Canada or the US are preferred by Australian employers when it comes to filling vacant trainee positions here in psychiatry. These are generally positions that are not being able to be filled by local graduates. Now, whilst it's not impossible for trainee psychiatry doctors from other countries to also obtain posts, it's more difficult as the process to gaining registration is more complex. However, if you have significant experience as a trainee psychiatrist, you may be able to obtain a position for a maximum of 2 years under the short-term specialist medical training pathway. Is there a recognition of prior learning for IMG trainees? Well, colleges have become better in Australia at assessing trainee doctors from other countries for RPL, recognition of prior learning. In fact, I recently assisted a trainee doctor who worked in the UK to obtain almost 3 years off their 5-year RANZCP psychiatry training program. That being said, RPL generally reduces the amount of experience you may have to undertake, but doesn't normally excuse you from the key RANZCP assessments. So the end effect may be to compact the number of assessment requirements you need to complete in the remaining time. Finally, some tips for securing a psychiatry post in Australia. So thus far, it probably sounds like being able to work as a psychiatry in Australia is a bit of a lay down misere. And whilst it is true that psychiatry is one of the top medical specialties that employers are regularly trying to fill in Australia from international doctors, it's not just a matter of sending off a quick email with a 3-year out-of-date CV attached. There is still a bit of work ahead of you. So finally, here are my recommendations for you, my 5 top tips for what you should be doing if you're keen on working in psychiatry in Australia. First off, ensure that you do have an up-to-date and employer-friendly resume. This should be around 3 to 6 pages in length depending on your experience. And you should make sure wherever possible that you tailor it to individual job openings. If you're needing tips on your resume or your CV, we have several posts about this matter on the blog, as well as a service for helping you redo your resume if you'd like some assistance with this key document. Secondly, if you're going to apply for a specialist role, it's worth reviewing the documentation on the college website first to see if you will be eligible. And we also have a handy free short course on the specialist pathway that you can take as well. Third, whilst it is sometimes possible to score a post in a major Australian city like Sydney or Melbourne, if you're too limited about where you want to work, you are very likely to severely limit your chances and maybe miss out. Bear in mind that once you complete your first year or 2 under supervision, you will then normally be able to be eligible for specialist registration or general registration. At this point, you can often move jobs and locations much more easily. So the key message here is to be open to all possibilities for your first job. You may even like working in regional Western Australia or the northwest coast of Tasmania. Fourthly, and following on from the above point, whilst it is possible to directly approach employers for posts in psychiatry, this is only really about 50% of the job market available. It is often unclear which publicly advertised positions are open to IMG doctors, and employers are also often directly working with medical recruitment companies to fill vacant spots. So for this reason, I generally recommend that you do contact a medical recruitment company if you believe you're eligible for a specialist position as an IMG or a trainee psychiatry doctor from one of the competent authority countries. If you fill in the survey below, we can maybe put you in contact with our recommended medical recruitment company. Fifthly and finally, if an employer is interested in you, they will invite you for an interview. Now, this may be the first time you've sat a job interview in some time, maybe years, and it will almost certainly be the first job interview that you've sat for in Australia. You may be a little nervous, and it will be important to give a good impression. So you might therefore want to consider getting some assistance by the way of some interview coaching beforehand. Thanks for watching the video. If you're watching on YouTube, I'd encourage you to subscribe and turn on notifications so you can find out about other videos that I produce. And regardless of where you're watching, be it Facebook, LinkedIn or YouTube, don't forget to leave me a like and a comment and check out the Advanced Med blog. And I'll see you in the next video. And remember, if you want to get some more in-depth help with your particular situation, I do offer risk-free strategy calls, which are available where we can hop online and get you some answers and clarity quickly.